Hi heathen. So every now and again when I'm in a self-flagellating mood, I will go listen to conservatives talk about Marxism, and without fail it makes me want to jump off a bridge. Every conservative talking head has something to say about Marxism and wokeism, but if you ask them to define those terms, they would struggle. They absolutely cannot. Now, I have a degree in economics and I've spent a fair amount of time studying Marx. That doesn't mean I know everything, but it does mean that I know quite a bit, so I'm going to give you guys a brief primer because I simply cannot take this anymore. So before we get started, a couple of facts. Marx had a lifelong collaborator named Friedrich Engels. He also was heavily influenced by Hegelian philosophy, and he argued across his writings that we should struggle against and push back against and dismantle all systems of oppression and exploitation. The concept that underpins almost all of Marx's writings is something called alienation, which is effectively a social ill that's created when a subject and an object are separated from one another and they should be together. You'll see this idea come up a lot if you study historical materialism, which is the name given to Marx's theory of history. So basically, historical materialism says that the cause and power of all historical events is based in the economic development of a country and in the social, political, and cultural upheavals that results from changing the modes of production. Arguably, Marx's most famous writings are the Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital, and we're going to briefly discuss the former as well as a few of his lesser-known works that I think are important. Das Kapital was published in 1848 when revolution was sweeping Europe, and it is unequivocally a critique and a denouncement of capitalism. He argues that capitalism is inherently exploitative, he analyzes class struggle, and he encourages working-class political organization. After the Paris Uprising in 1871, he wrote The Civil War in France, in which he argues that the only viable alternative to capitalism is a system in which all created institutions are owned and operated by the working class. In 1875, he pens Critique of the Gotha Program, in which he discusses the transition between capitalism and communism. And this is where he argues that socialism and communism are phases in the construction of a post-capitalist society. Communism and Marxism are often conflated, but it's worth noting that Marxism is a philosophy and communism is an ideology that aims to create a society in which there is communal or common ownership of the means of production. This matters because people will say that communism always fails, and then they will point to post-Russian Revolution Soviet Union, where they are conflating the political, social, and economic system that arose out of that with communism, and it was not. The Soviet Union imposed state ownership of property, and while Marx does argue that there will likely need to be a transitional period in which the state owns the property, it is meant to be transitional on the path to common ownership. The Soviet Union denied fair election results, they punished dissenters, and all of this led to the stunting of economic growth, which is ultimately what caused the collapse.